Welcome to the Woodrow Wilson house.
This house is where Woodrow Wilson spent the last 3 years of his life, from 1921 to 1924. He purchased the house in 1921 for $150,000 with Nobel Peace Prize money for creating European peace after World War I and partially from donations from friends. The house was built in 1916 and it is a Georgian Revival townhome with symmetrical rooms on each side.
This room was the drawing room, where he entertained most of his guests. He had good relations with many countries during World War I, many of which gave him gifts. This painting of an Armenian woman was a gift of thanks for helping Armenia. Wilson's negotiation for Armenian independence was a part of his 14 points, which was his speech to encourage Germans to negotiate for peace to end World War I. Another gift was this tapestry from the French.
This room was a library, and it was believed that this was his favorite room in the house. A lot of the items that were of importance to him were stored in this room. He was the first president to use the radio as a form of communication to address the American people. The pen that is shown in the display case was a pen that Woodrow Wilson used to sign the Declaration of War against Germany on April 2, 1917.
This is the solarium room where Wilson had breakfast in the morning. You can see the gardens from the window. They chose this location because it offered some sort of privacy.
This is the dining room, where the Wilsons had formal meals with friends and visitors. The portrait above the table is of Wilson's wife, Edith. Mrs. Wilson had a tradition after Woodrow Wilson died to invite the new First Lady for lunch each election cycle. She had this tradition from the 1920s through the 1960s, ending with Jackie Kennedy. Both Edith and Woodrow were both from Virginia.
This was the third floor, which contained 4 bedrooms. One room was the nurses' quarters. Due to his declining health, he had to have nurses stay at the house. Another room was Wilson's bedroom, and this is the bed he passed away in February 1924. He had the first shell fired by U.S. soldiers in France during World War I on display. This was kept as a reminder that he was a wartime president and a reminder that much of his legacy today relates to his bringing about peace at the end of World War I and creating the League of Nations. The League of Nations brought about much international cooperation on health, labor problems, and refugee affairs. The League of Nations was a tenet of the Treaty of Versailles, which punished Germany and was created to solve problems from World War I.
This was Edith Wilson's bedroom. She outlived her husband by 37 years. As you can see from around the room, there are a lot of images of Pocahontas because Edith was a direct descendant of Pocahontas and was very proud of this known fact. Edith also kept a stuffed tiger in her room as a reminder that Woodrow went to Princeton. The house was perceived as modern in the 1920s and had electric fixtures throughout, including the elevator.
This is the butler's pantry. It is located directly above the kitchen. Food would be prepared in the kitchen and the dumbwaiter would bring up the food. It would also be used by the staff as a functional space, like to clean dishes. It was also a place to store the decorative china. Some of the china pieces were gifted to him from the King of Belgium and the tea set issued by Allied powers, which the U.S. was a part of. It also included Wilson's official china collection. This was the communication system used to communicate with the staff. If Miss Wilson needed help, she could buzz and it would light up.
Although the kitchen was restored to appear as it was during Wilson's life in the 1920s, Edith continued to update appliances until her death in 1961, as shown in this photo, which was taken in the 1960s. Edith kept old appliances for historic preservation, including an icebox to keep perishables cold and a coal stove.
A lesser-known contribution to Wilson's presidency were his domestic policies, such as the Clayton Antitrust Act, which made certain business practices illegal. It dictated accountability of individual corporate officers and clarified guidelines and prevented trust.
Another domestic affair was the Federal Reserve Act, which was an act that created the Federal Reserve System, the central banking system. And it also issued the US dollar.
What motivated him to stay in D.C.?
So that's a good question. I think we don't necessarily know for certain why he stayed. I think part of it had to do with his health. His health had deteriorated quite a bit, and so staying here was kind of a practical decision because he had doctors and nurses here and a support system. And then I think part of it too had to do with the fact that he had hoped that he could re-enter public life in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not necessarily politics, but like opening up a law office or going into publishing. And staying in DC would have made all of that possible, assuming his health had improved, but of course it didn't.
And what's an interesting fact on Woodrow Wilson that not many people may know about him?
Gosh, that's a good question. There are a lot of, sort of a lot of interesting items. I mean, I always get a kick out of the fact that his second wife Edith could trace her lineage back to Pocahontas, right? Which is sort of a fun fact and somewhat unique. It's something that she often, brought up, and it's sort of an interesting point. So yeah, I would like to point that out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wilson's contribution as president helped shape domestic and international affairs. His continued stay in D.C. after his presidency makes his house unique, and he was the only president buried in D.C.
Go with the brothers, boo, you know how we do. It's not for me to say.